Senator Schatz leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension of the hearing room as he asked a blunt question: Is the United States being invaded by a foreign nation? General Kane, sitting with measured calm, quickly responded that there was no such invasion, no foreign state-sponsored troops storming American soil, yet the question carried more weight than it seemed. Schatz wasn't asking just to hear a denial, he was asking because the administration had already deployed troops in Los Angeles, a decision that raised alarms about whether this was a localized response to unrest or the beginning of a sweeping precedent that could allow the military to roll onto city streets anywhere in the country.
There should be some sort of paper flow that the committee, the Congress, the public can look at in invoking Title 10, Section 12406. So can you give us some clarification on whether the orders that were issued apply to specifically Los Angeles, to California generally, or is this a nationwide order?
The orders that have been issued, which are publicly available and known, relate to an ongoing situation in Los Angeles, which could expand to other places. But it's quite easy to point out that there has been an invasion of 21 million illegals in our country under the previous administration.
So
this administration was elected to get a hold of that.
Yeah, could we just
and when you have ICE officers being attacked with concrete blocks,
Secretary,
they should be allowed to do their job.
Secretary, I'd really like to not try to create a viral moment for either of us. I'm actually trying to understand kind of the scope of this order. The order effectuates the ability to mobilize the Guard and the Marines. In the order, it does not specify a location. It does not specify which Marines or which Guard. And I'm trying to figure out, if you decided to do this collectively in Kansas or any other place, would you need to specify a new sort of fact pattern, or do you think this order applies to any Guard, anywhere, any service branch, anywhere? It's just I get your justification. Mm-hmm. We disagree about the circumstances. I'm just trying to figure out, did you just potentially mobilize every Guard everywhere and every service member everywhere? I mean, create the framework for that. I understand you didn't. I'm saying, what does the document do, in your opinion?
Senator, if you notice, the initial order of 2,000 in California was followed by a follow-on order for the additional 2,000, with a recognition that the situation there required more resources in order to support law enforcement. So part of it is getting ahead of a problem so that if in other places, if there are other riots in places where law enforcement officers are threatened, we would have the capability to surge National Guard there if necessary. And thankfully, in most of those states, you'd have a governor that recognizes the need for it, supports it, and mobilizes it him or herself. In California, unfortunately, the governor wants to play politics with it.
I did step on the last part of your sentence, so I'm going to try to take turns here. Just on the 747 question, did the Department of Defense initiate the conversation with the Qataris? Did they initiate the conversation? How did that go?
Senator, I have to go back and review it, but we've been a part of the ongoing conversation.
Yeah, but I think it kind of matters who's asking, doesn't it?
Ultimately, the Defense Department is, or soon will be, when the memorandum of understanding is signed, in receipt of a gift from the Qatari government that could serve, once it's modified, eventually as something that the president could use.
I mean, I think this is illegal and unconstitutional, and I won't rant about that, but I actually think, from the standpoint of our collective responsibilities, it very much matters what the paper flow was, who started these conversations. Did it come out of the White House? Did it come out of the Secretary of State or the President or the SecDef or at a lower level or ambassadors? Like, we're entitled to know, because we can agree or disagree about the propriety of this. But my basic request of you is that if we're going to disagree, let's disagree with the same set of facts. Let's have the documentation on the Qatari aircraft. Let's have the same set of documentation.
Schatz pushed the Secretary for clarity, highlighting the stakes: civil liberties, state sovereignty, and the line between national security and political theater. Because the truth was unavoidable, there was no Red Dawn happening, no foreign army marching across California. What existed was a long-running border issue twisted into a fear narrative, a political weapon wielded to justify actions that blurred the limits of power. The hearing shifted into a deeper debate. Schatz pressed about rebellion. Were frustrated citizens being exaggerated into something far larger to justify military action? The response he received was vague, acknowledging unrest but offering no definition that justified branding it as rebellion. Schatz made clear that invoking extraordinary laws like Title 10, Section 12406, should never happen without a clear paper trail, documents that the public, Congress, and the courts can examine. Orders this serious demand transparency. Without a record, the administration is effectively writing itself blank checks to act without oversight. Schatz asked directly, were these orders specific to Los Angeles, broader to California, or so vague they could enable deployment nationwide? The secretary admitted the focus was Los Angeles but conceded it could expand elsewhere. That admission carried the quiet weight of danger. Vagueness in military orders is not harmless. It creates the legal opening for leaders to justify sweeping domestic deployments without the checks democracy requires. In the middle of this exchange came an inflammatory claim that the nation was already under invasion by 21 million undocumented immigrants. Schatz challenged this framing. The border, he pointed out, is undeniably a complex issue, but it has been so for decades. Anyone acting like the situation suddenly appeared overnight is misleading the public. The truth is layered. Yes, there are security concerns. Yes, agencies like DHS must address them. But the border crisis also exists because of economic forces and humanitarian realities. America's economy depends on labor, while the legal pathways for migration are broken. People will continue to come as long as opportunity exists. Fear-mongering does nothing to solve this reality. If leaders were serious, they would push comprehensive reform, balancing security with systems that actually work. Instead, they recycle the same slogans about chaos, using fear to campaign rather than to govern. As the exchange went deeper, Schatz pressed on the dangerous lack of specificity in the orders. If the authority extended nationwide, could the Secretary legally mobilize every National Guard unit in the country without a new justification? The Secretary evaded, noting that the initial deployment of 2,000 troops in California had been followed by a second wave of 2,000 more. It was described as getting ahead of the problem. But what problem? Where was the threshold? Where was the documentation to explain why 4,000 troops were suddenly required? The absence of transparency meant the American people had no way to judge whether these deployments were proportionate or simply political posturing. This is how oversight crumbles, first through vagueness, then through normalization, until military deployments on domestic soil become routine without the public ever realizing how much has changed. Meanwhile, reports of ICE officers being attacked with concrete blocks fueled the debate. These were real dangers, not fabrications, but instead of drawing clear distinctions between isolated violence and systemic rebellion, officials blurred the lines. Fear and exaggeration took the place of clarity. Schatz resisted that approach. He insisted the public deserves real answers on how security threats are handled, not just vague references and sweeping orders. Because when communication is murky, it breeds panic. Communities fear militarization, law enforcement feels unsupported, and conspiracy theories thrive. Leadership isn't about stoking fear, it's about offering transparency and direction. Then the hearing took an unexpected turn. Schatz asked about something few expected, a Qatari aircraft. Specifically, he questioned whether the Department of Defense was in the process of accepting a gift from Qatar, a plane that could eventually serve presidential functions once modified. The secretary sidestepped specifics, admitting only that ongoing conversations existed. Schatz cut through the fog, warning that such a gift could be unconstitutional and certainly raised questions of foreign influence. If foreign governments can hand over assets of this scale, the door to corruption and undue influence swings wide open. And if the American people aren't given full documentation, emails, memos, call records, they have no way to know who is influencing their government. Schatz demanded receipts, making clear that speculation thrives in secrecy, while accountability thrives in evidence. This is where the larger battle line became clear: state governors versus federal power. Some governors are quick to deploy the National Guard, seeing it as a straightforward tool for emergencies. Others resist, warning about escalation and overreach. That division may frustrate federal leaders, but it is vital. In a democracy, checks and balances are not obstacles, they are safeguards. Even in emergencies, especially in emergencies, power must be accountable. If one administration can send armored vehicles into American cities with a vague order, the line between democracy and authoritarianism collapses. Schatz emphasized that Americans must be able to see the documents behind these decisions, the memos, the risk assessments, the legal justifications. Without transparency, public trust evaporates, and once trust is gone, security policies are destined to fail. Documentation is not a minor detail, it is the foundation of democratic accountability. Schatz made clear that if lawmakers and citizens are to debate these policies, they must be working with the same set of facts, not rumors, not partisan spin, but real records. That means the orders authorizing deployments, the conversations with foreign governments, the justifications for troop increases, all must be placed on the table. Because only then can disagreements happen honestly. Without them, one side argues with documents hidden away, while the other argues with speculation, and the result is chaos rather than governance. Schatz demanded bipartisan transparency, not slogans, not half-answers but the raw truth, because without it, corruption flourishes. Accepting gifts from foreign governments without documentation invites scandal. Expanding military orders without explanation invites abuse, and ignoring these issues while hiding behind secrecy leaves the American people unprotected and uninformed. The underlying point was simple yet profound. This debate wasn't about California versus Washington, it wasn't even about left versus right, it was about whether democracy could survive under leaders who treat transparency as optional. If military orders can be written vaguely and expanded quietly, the public loses oversight. If foreign governments can hand out gifts without receipts, the public loses trust. If governors are pressured to deploy troops without clear criteria, the public loses control of its own security policies. These are not small stakes, they are the very definition of accountability in a republic. Schatz challenged his colleagues to reject the spin cycle of viral moments and instead demand clarity. Not because it was politically convenient, but because it was necessary to preserve the basic function of government. As the hearing closed, the message resonated. If leaders truly have nothing to hide, they should release everything, orders, emails, memos, so the American people can see what's being done in their name. Until then, every claim of accountability is just an illusion. That is why Schatz's questions mattered. They weren't rhetorical flourishes. They were demands for a government that governs in daylight rather than in shadow, and that is the question left hanging. Are these deployments and deals truly about protecting Americans, or are they about consolidating power and influence? Until the receipts are on the table, the public is left to wonder whether the government is serving them or selling them out, and perhaps that is the most dangerous uncertainty of all.